غير بطاريات. Five. Change the battery. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment, so if everyone could please find their seats, we would appreciate it. And of course, if there's anyone on the other side of the wall in the pavilion, please welcome to join us as we're going to be getting started in just a moment. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. We know that the week of COP is quite busy, especially on today at Adaptation Agriculture Day, so we appreciate you taking the time to join with us for this incredibly important conversation. My name is Brian Dershowitz. I am with the Business Council for International Understanding. We are a nonprofit organization that serves as a neutral third-party convener, bringing together the public and private sector to discuss a number of important topics, and we operate throughout the world. And again, deeply appreciative of everyone joining with us today to have our conversation around sustainable solutions for the agricultural sector. Very grateful for our partners in joining with us today that you'll hear from momentarily. And if there's anything at any point, myself, I'm sure you've been in contact with my colleague Joe Walters as well. Please do find either one of us after the event is over. Let us know how we can be of any assistance, and we are more than happy to provide any help that we can as we close out this first week of COP and looking forward to a very busy second week of COP. And of course, we want to make sure that the conversations do not end when we all hop on our flights. So how can we take all of the conversations and the wonderful ideas that we are hearing this week and turn them into actionable next steps? And that is our goal with today's conversation. It is the start of the conversation, certainly not the end of it. We look forward to working with all of you on continuing that process and making strides to make collectively a better world for ourselves and future generations to come. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today's session. He's the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the current chairperson of AGRA. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome him to join us to the stage. So, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to be at the laudable occasion of COP27. Africa is in a critical moment. Gains has been reversed or even eroded due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the global food commodity price crisis, And as the IPCC has reported, the evidence of climate change impacting agriculture is clear across the continent. In 2022, over 20 million people, at least 10 million children are currently facing severe drought conditions in Africa due to the failure of 4 and possibly 5 consecutive planting seasons due to drought, mainly in the Horn of Africa and the Sahel region, with the 2022 March-May rainy season likely to be the driest on human record, killing livestock and crops, displacing population, increasing the risk of disease and malnutrition, conflict, and pushing children and families to the brink of death or destitution. Though Africa barely contributes to climate change, which is 3 to 4% of greenhouse gas emission, we are committed to working with other continents to contribute the solution. Our main interest is in strengthening resilience, adaptation to climate change. Climate change is also likely to intensify the current challenge of water scarcity. Poor and vulnerable populations of sub-Saharan Africa are likely to face the greatest risk. Climate change has intensified the global hydrological cycle, causing several societal impacts, which are felt in disproportionately by vulnerable people. Global and local food supply chains from China to Africa to the United States, as we are seeing in California. Today, the fact of the matter is that the continent is incurring a huge bill from importing food, especially from the rest of the world, which is about 64 billion in 2020. While intra-Africa trade on food is a meager $16 billion only in 2020, representing about 17% of the total food imported. Sub-Saharan Africa countries in this region are significantly vulnerable to a perfect storm. 1 out of every 2 Africans in the region lives in a country exposed to all 3 dimensions of the crisis, which is food, energy, and finance. Overall, the region is particularly exposed to the financial crisis, given the high number of countries at risk of debt distress. Up to 58 million Africans may fall into poverty this year alone. Over 280 million people in Africa going hungry, which is 1/5, or when 42 million live in poverty in the continent. USD 3.5 cost for a healthy diet, and 85% in sub-Saharan Africa can't afford that. This is not the first time we experienced a food crisis, but the past crisis was not as compounded as today's. It was either a financial crisis or a food crisis, but today is a combination of crises, multiple crises, coming out of the devastating COVID-19. We were met with fuel, fertilizer, and now food and finance exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine war. All this make the impact of climate change extremely and undermine efforts to combat climate change. Other than this, even though there has been an increase in agricultural and food production in Africa, data is showing that this growth has been in a downward trajectory due to climate change and climate variabilities and the loss of ecosystem services. Africa has a growing population that is outstripping production systems. The complexities that climate change is bringing are making it even more difficult to cater for the needs of a growing population. What are the potential solutions leading towards sustainable agriculture? Recognizing this global and continental challenge, we at AGRA are currently employing an approach called sustainable farming. Sustainable farming is about employing integrated approach for achieving multiple goals of improving productivity and profitability of smallholder farmers, managing climate and market risks, while enhancing soil health and ecological services of landscapes. We must take a sustainably and resilient lens in developing and implementing policies and prioritize investments in climate-proof agriculture, including land restoration, reforestation, irrigation, drought-resistant crops, and market infrastructure. We must translate the food system's commitment to adaptation and implementation. Business as usual will not deliver the desired change. The complexities of African food systems require government support with a dedicated and consistent oversight at the present Prime Minister level, at the President's and Prime Minister's level, ready to make tough decisions, deal with vested interests, and inspire others to set bold ambitions. Market incentives for resilient crops is necessary. Increased investment towards production infrastructure is mandatory. Increased investment in adaptation of production and post-production technologies is critical. Therefore, protect consumers during the ongoing crisis. And also establish and strengthen functional strategic food reserves, critical to always be ready to stabilize food supplies and prices to support domestic approach. This is notable for ensuring food security in times of crisis. We have youth employment policy interventions that Africa has a growing workforce, partly high-skilled, with higher education and technical and vocational level education, but mostly unemployed with an entrepreneurial spirit. The youth are developing business, adapting technologies, seeds, inputs, techniques that will help them sustainably grow their farm and their businesses while uplifting their families and communities. And lastly, land tenure policy reforms are also critical. More secure property rights and removal of restrictions on land markets have the potential to create both efficiency and equity benefits. Emphasis should be put on improving social conditions of smallholder farmers in order to improve their income and wealth. Having said this, I thank you for the business community for organizing this session, and thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you a fruitful deliberations, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Raising so many valid, good points. We must continue to come together as a community, as a worldwide community, especially coming off of COVID, and making sure that there is equity throughout the entire world in how we take these types of approaches and formalize these types of solutions. It will take all of us, and we must remember to leave no person behind and focus in on opportunities to help our fellow citizens throughout the world, no matter where they may live. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our panel that will be taking place and introduce the moderator, Michael Keller, who will be leading this session. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency, dear colleagues, wow, what a day. It's the AGRA Day today, and I would like to invite my colleagues with whom we will have, I hope, a very intensive discussion, that Martin, Yousef, Matthias, and Eski, please join me here on the floor. I think the most important thing today is we are fully aware of all the challenges we are facing. We know the challenges, since months, since years, we are aware. I think what is more important today that we speak about the opportunities and how we act. And I think how we act also together. And when we are thinking about acting together, that's where we need to get the bits together, also between emerging actions, because we have emergencies. And you mentioned it also, Your Excellency. We need to feed more people quicker. We know it. But we have also to think about the long-term solutions. And we have to build these sustainable agriculture farming systems. When I received the invitation to moderate this table, I was asked to move the needle. My goodness, I cannot move the needle alone. We need to move the needle all together here, and I think the diversity of the speakers here can help us to start this dialogue. And the dialogue, I think that's the Business Council of International Understanding. It's about dialogue, and it's about partnership. What I think is the most important one, we need to think how to empower farmers. All starts with the farmers, potentially. But empower farmers needs also empowering the actors who are working with the farmers. That means also the private sector, who is certainly an essential driver. And that means also we need to speak about the incentives. Incentives on the whole value chain today. And without no further comment from my side, perhaps we start with Martin, who is from the African Development Bank, to give us his perspective on how we can, on the ground, move the needle, and what can also the African Development Bank do in terms of policy debate, but also in terms of financial incentives. Please, Martin.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Undoubtedly, smallholder farmers in Africa can feed their nations and feed themselves. Former Prime Minister Dessalegn here, his country is a shining example. Smallholder farmers organized into clusters, given the best technologies of heat-tolerant wheat varieties, giving credit for inputs, good irrigation, have raised yields. And now I'm talking of yields in lowland irrigated areas, from 1.5 tons to 6 tons a hectare. Ethiopia last year, this year did not import any wheat. There was some wheat going to the Tigray region, but it was all food aid. But the country itself did not, because farmers got 3 things, and I want to mention those 3 things, very, very important. Number 1 was technologies. Farmers can feed themselves with the right package of improved varieties, crop protection, cultural practices, they can feed themselves. The second one was policy. The government had a clear policy to provide credit to farmers. That's very important. Without credit, they cannot access the technologies. And the third one was extension. They trained the farmers, organized them. So there is no doubt about that. But you also mentioned the private sector. You see, the private sector has far more money than development partners or government. They have a lot of money. But they need a level playing field. They need regulatory regimes. They need infrastructure that will ensure that they can get a return on their money. Without that, they wouldn't invest. So it's clear, those 3 things, political commitment for all the regulatory and the infrastructure, right policies and technologies. If you have those 3 things, Africa and the rest of the world can feed itself sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the clear words, and I will directly go to the private sector, because you told us there's a lot of money, we have a lot of money, but I think it's not only about money. It's about also all the things you mentioned, innovation, bring it to the farmers. Perhaps, Ezgi, if you would like to start to show also how you build together with farmers sustainable agriculture farming, and perhaps also to respond yet, what are your needs, perhaps to go also further when you think on smallholder farmers in Africa and around. Please, Ezgi.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here. And good morning. We made it. It's Saturday. It's the day that we've all been looking for. So I'm Ezgi Barcinas. I head up the sustainability team at AB InBev. We're the leading global brewer with operations in nearly 50 countries around the world, and we source directly from farmers in over a dozen countries. With agronomists out in the field, day in, day out, we really understand the challenges of the farmer. We try to understand the challenges of the farmers, because we know that if we can tackle farmers' problems, we can tackle our business problems. And, if I can take a step back, looking at COP26 last year, we were all talking about how can we put food and ag on the agenda. And I like to think that, over the last year, collectively, we've really done a good job in putting ag on the agenda more prominently, giving it a day of its own. You know, today we're on Adaptation and Agriculture Day. And, you know, yes, maybe part of it has been compounded by the food security challenges we see around the world, but part of it is also how we think about that future climate resilience, the future of food systems, food innovation. Which brings me to kind of my point to your question around how do we do it? What do we need as the private sector? You know, I really think of it as what do we need as the world, right? How do we approach this? The private sector, of course, the point of entry is going to be supply security. You know, sourcing those raw materials that we need, which is barley, sorghum, cassava, the water we need, hops. But beyond that, you need an enabling environment. You need access to the farmers. The farmers need access to research. They need access to insights, data, weather information. They need access to financing. You know, we need better policies, but we also need to be thinking of, and His Excellency mentioned this, you know, we're in a moment where we're trying to tackle multiple crises. And I like to think that we should approach anything we do in terms of multi-solving. We can no longer solve for one thing, right? We can no longer solve for just climate mitigation and just decarbonizing. At the same time, we have to solve for adaptation and build that resilience and get ready for the change that's come and that's yet to come. We also have to solve for not just productivity at the field level, but really, again, thinking through long-term sustainability of the supply chains. We have to solve for how to formalize those markets. We have to really think through, you know, how we're approaching, you know, not just tackling this at the field level, but along the edges of the field and what that means in terms of soil erosion or runoffs and how you think of it from an ecosystem biodiversity angle. So, you know, there are many examples I can give you. One, in Zambia, you know, we source cassava, and what we found out is that the farmers, because for years it's been grown for home use, they were propagating the crops at the field, and over time, the variety of the crop was not any longer ideal for the soil and climate conditions. So we had to come in and partner with ZARI locally, the Ag Research Institute, and really think through, okay, what are the new varieties of cassava that we can bring into this? What does that look like? How do we work with extension teams on the ground with those farmers? And once we enhance cassava research, that also helps broader communities. It helps other off-takers as well, right? So again, if you approach it to try and tackle systemic challenges, it supports everyone else, but you have to be really thinking of multi-solving. Another example is through the World Economic Forum. We've been members of the Food Innovation Hub, and we're really thinking through what does food innovation look like, and how can we approach it jointly as a group of actors, because it's going to require every one of us on this panel and more players to come together and tackle some of these challenges. And you know, we've identified a place in Colombia where we source barley from. Another major company, CPG company, sources potato from, and now we're putting in place governance and inviting other actors to come in and think through how do you implement regenerative, sustainable agriculture practices at the field level. So not just as one off-taker that you expect with the farmer in one crop cycle, but really thinking through field level, systems level transformation. So many examples, yeah.
Thanks so much. A very, very clear message on building underground examples. And I cannot more agree with you. All starts with the seed, the Secretary General of the International Seed Federation. I need to mention this one, I think. But Matthias, you heard also, we know we have to act immediately, but we have also to think how we build long-term relationship on the ground. This win-win situation also with smallholder farmers around the world, and when we are thinking here smallholder farmers also Asia and in Africa. What is the approach also of Bayer moving ahead, moving the needle in this cooperation and coordination with smallholder farmers, and perhaps also what you are looking for also policy-wise, what we need more? Is it only about investment? Is it only about empowering farmers, or is it also how to build this accessibility, perhaps also of innovation to farmers?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. And since you are my Secretary General, I bow, yeah. We are a pretty large seed producer, and the reason why Bayer is such a large global seed producer is that we took a decision to merge the global leading company in biology, which was Monsanto, with Bayer, who was the leading company in chemistry. So we brought two R&D teams together to work on some of those challenges. And the way I look at this is, starting with the smallholders, let's call them family farms. Joe Stadwell wrote an amazing book about how Asia works, analyzing what brought growth to countries like Korea, like Taiwan, of course even Japan after the Second World War. And these are different countries, huge diversity, different political systems, not dissimilar to what we see in Africa. But one thing all the successful countries did really well, and that is they strengthened family farms. That's not like a mitigation nice to have. That's really something we need to do. If we want Africa to thrive, take a page out of Joe Stadwell's book. That's point number one. When we merged Bayer and Monsanto, we looked at where are the synergies. I already said biology, chemistry, great synergies. And then we looked at, oh my God, where are we missing the boat? And we missed the boat on smallholder farmers. We have not strategically focused on them. We had initiatives there. But there are 500 million of those family farms, and certainly our investment was not like on par with that large number of current, but most importantly, future customers. Yeah. So that's the big strategic shift we started to enable 4 years ago. And one of the elements is that if you are anywhere in the world, a farmer that lives at the verge of poverty, you do not need to pay for the innovation. The royalties, the more successful, larger farms have to pay. You do not have to pay if you are at the verge of poverty. And that is really important. And you spoke about what I think we need. And let me explain it at an example. You mentioned already cassava. Yeah? Really important crop in the global south. Yes. It's a bedrock for nutrition for many sub-Saharan African communities, also in Latin America. We have been working with partners from around the world to apply the latest, greatest technology, which is gene silencing, RNAi technology, to cassava. This has been approved last July in Kenya, and it increases the yield because it protects the crop against the virus. It contracts when, like an insect, a white fly kind of comes there. When you see on the field the difference between this technology and the traditional technology, and then you help with adaptation in the way you just described, you can just see what's possible. We have seen biology, chemistry, and dare I say, artificial intelligence coming together and developing mRNA vaccines. It was an amazing achievement. We wouldn't sit here today, certainly not so many without masks, without this magical achievement at this intersection of those three areas. We have to provide access to the possibilities for those family farms in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and we have to do that in a way that changes preconceived notions. And I believe the deal is we invite innovation, but we provide free access for the poorest of those communities.
Thank you so much. Very strong message, and I think what we all feel, there's no one-size-fits-all solution in any case, but all will go also through science and innovation, and how to bridge this science innovation solution to the farmers.
Dare I say, it ceases to amaze me what's possible in the space.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason why I believe we can get adaptation and mitigation going is because I have a front row seat in talking to our researchers and seeing what's possible. So we have to welcome this innovation.
That means, you see, we said we need to be optimistic, and we should be optimistic and not only think on all the challenges we're facing, there are opportunities. Now, Yousef, can we really be optimistic? Because we are at your house here somehow, we're at home, in your home. And what is your guidance? What is your feeling also? And I would like perhaps to add one point, because we speak about empowering family farmers or smallholder farmers or subsistence farmers, but I think we need also to think about how we can empower the diversity of economical actors also. Because yes, we have multinationals acting, but what we are looking for is perhaps also how we can bridge in all the SMEs of the world, also even yet existing in Africa. I will come to this, Martin, perhaps to this point also back to you. But Yousef, perhaps give us your guidance, your feeling today. Where are we going?
Well, thank you. Allow me to start by disrupting.
Oh.
Our motto today is international understanding. Today's international understanding is that millions go to bed hungry while others do tourism in space. So that's the starting point of there's something wrong in the world. Now, there's three narratives, I suppose, in the future of agriculture from a UNFCCC perspective, at least. One is that of the impending ecological crisis. We know the effects of climate change. We know its effects on food security. His Excellency, the Prime Minister, reminded us how Africa is particularly vulnerable. That's one narrative. The second narrative is the promise of the policy process, the international policy process. So we have the Paris Agreement. We have very clear objectives. We have a paradigm that does not help in achieving these objectives. By now, we were supposed to have pledges going down by 43% by 2030. The current numbers show plus 11%. So there's something wrong there. Another big elephant in the room. Agriculture, of course, is a natural entry point for both mitigation and adaptation. It's a huge player on this. But at the same time, what is the paradigm in our current economic system? Since the Paris Agreement was adopted, $4 trillion more new dollars have gone into fossil fuel investment. Similarly, in unsustainable agriculture, despite the fact that we have the techniques, we have the know-how, we don't need to invent much new technologies in order to achieve a regenerative food production environment. So it's a matter of mindset to a large extent. Now, the third part of the narrative about the future is that of the impending techno-economic paradigm shift. So we have AI, big data, satellite technology, Internet of Things, and between now and the end of the decade is where that transformation will happen. It can either be guided by maximizing the bottom line, or it can be guided through policy incentives that can help us bridge that gap in mindset and reach that desirable world which is regenerative, where each additional farming activity actually improves soil rather than takes away from it. Actually, where each human adds more to the natural support system than they take away from it. Think of the implications of that on demographics, on natural resources. So it's about a transformation, acknowledging that what is possible and what is desirable and in fact necessary is actually within our reach already. It's just a matter of alignment of incentives and alignment of political will. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a clear message. I'm coming to Martin. Perhaps we are speaking about this transformation of sustainable agriculture system. That means how you see then, from your perspective, also the role of the private sector in Africa, how we can strengthen the private sector, but how we can bring an even more private sector, also Northern Hemisphere or elsewhere, into this whole discussion about transforming the sustainable agricultural sector in Africa, knowing that there is a need to reach each farmer everywhere. And we know the difficult situations we have. We know the different situations in the countries. What can we do? What can you do? And what should we start to do perhaps more together in the future?
No, thank you very much. And the private sector, you have two kinds of private sectors. You have the SMEs that we all know, the mom and pop businesses. Then you have the large organized private sector like Bayer, Cargill, and other ones. They're very, very important because they bring organizational capital, not just finance, but they bring organizational capital. And if you compare them to the SMEs provide a lot of jobs, but they are so important because they are able to bring that level of specialization that is needed in any sector. So even in fragile countries or in stable countries, you need the large and the small private sectors. We at the bank are doing three things to really help them to come in. One is partial guarantees. We offer partial guarantees and forced losses for people who are willing to invest in fragile countries. So if you are to lose your shirt, we can give you back half of it, yeah, once we understand what your business is like. But the second is for the SMEs also. They're also very, very important. From the farmers to the agro-dealers, mom and pop shops, all the way to the women who process the food, the aggregators, they're also very important. For them, what we have done at the bank is two things. One is we provide risk-sharing facilities with commercial banks to lend to them. So if the commercial bank loses its money, we can actually make it up. And secondly, policy. We help the countries, particularly the governments of countries, to look at the policy environment. One of the biggest things that these SMEs suffer from is market infrastructure. You know, where to sell their things in a way that they can easily, you know, the transaction cost is not too high, including soft infrastructure, like e-payments and things like that. So we also do that a lot. But just to say that the bank actually launched in 2016 what we call our Feed Africa strategy. And it is meant to help the private sector to provide technologies and finance and know-how to the smallholder farmers. And we can tell you after 6 years or 7 years, indeed there's been a lot of progress, but there's much more progress that needs to be done. And for that, we need the government, the private sector, technical partners to all come together and with a renewed effort to ensure that Africa can feed itself. Yeah.
Thank you for a very clear message. I would like to go back to one point Your Excellency mentioned. We know today increased drought. We know increased pests, diseases in the fields. That means we have the challenges of today. But what we need also is to look in the longer perspective, the long look. Eski, when because very often companies are hearing, oh, you're only looking on your immediate benefit. You're only on the immediate benefits for a shareholder and others. But I think it's interesting to show perhaps also how companies are structuring their efforts also to the future. And I think the same question will go to Matthias. How, as also companies, we know that it will worsen. Climate change will worsen. We know we will have more challenges in future. How you structure yourself, and perhaps you can bring in also, we cannot do it alone. I think we all agree. Yeah. We need partners. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, why you do what you do really matters when you're tackling these things. Otherwise, you could be in the private sector and you could build programs that may sit in silos or be more philanthropic in nature than truly sustainable and building those local supply chains and local resilience. So, you know, when we think of supply security and when we, you know, with our footprint around the world in nearly 50 countries, we see the far-reaching impacts of climate change, from crop loss to crop disease to droughts, wildfires, floods, right? This is in our communities, and we see it. It's in our supply chain. And I'm fortunate I work for an industry where our supply chain is short and simple, so we have really good visibility, and where we don't, we implement new programs to enhance that transparency. So for us, I think what started with food and beverage companies was firstly trying to understand their water stress and really how it is today in terms of risk management, but how it's going to be into the future as you're looking into different models. So that was one aspect of it. As we were thinking of that, first we started looking at water stress years ago for our operations, and then we started thinking, hold on, 90% of our water use of what goes into that product is actually in agriculture. What about the water stress and the risk in our sourcing region? So then we mapped this out again years ago to try and understand what does water situation look like in these communities. What we found out is actually quite fascinating, because you don't usually look at this at a global aggregated level, but once you start putting the data together, what we found out is that almost all of barley is sourced from rain-fed regions, which showed us the importance of soil health. And I'm so happy that, you know, you mentioned soil, because I've been on the ground 5 days now. For 5 days every day, I've heard people talk about soil health. And it wasn't just in the fringe events and the niche conversations. It was actually in more common dialogues than you would imagine. So I think we really need to rethink soil and what that means and how it interacts with the climate, how it can be part of the solution, but how we need to also protect it to build that resilience. So then we started really understanding, okay, rain-fed land, soil health is important because we need to maintain that moisture for that farmer. How do we then start partnering with others to start and build soil health frameworks, to start and build biodiversity understanding, layering that data on top of it? And that gave us a lot of visibility into where this is going. And then when you couple that with climate analytics, predictive analytics, now we actually use NASA data to try and see how our sourcing regions are expected to shift. And what we see, especially for barley, is the sourcing regions are going to shift away from the equator. So yes, so you could say, you know, what I buy from France today is maybe 10, 20, 30 years later is going to be from the UK, but you don't know if the UK will be able to grow as much barley as France is today, right? So you need to build that resilience. Goes back to the adaptation point. So once you start really looking into the data and sharing that data with your partners along your value chain, you start implementing change. And I think change at the farm level comes through behavioral change as well. So the more you can substantiate that with data, the more you can find the influencer farmers. I'm from Cyprus. I come from a family of strawberry farmers. And I see, like, I remember growing up and visiting my grandmother in the village. And, you know, there would be 1 or 2 farmers that would try new seed varieties, or that would bring in new irrigation techniques. And all other farmers would watch them to see, are they going to fail? Is this like, are they experimenting? At the end of the season, they would be successful. Guess what? The next cycle, every single farmer in that village now is implementing that new way of farming, that technology. And I think we have to really think of this systemically, and we have to think of who are the trusted advisors and partners to these farmers, right? It could be through different associations, it could be through the private sector, it could be through the government. So again, I go back to my point around how do we multi-solve, how do we bring in others to really look at it at systems level?
Very clear, and I think the point also capacity building of farmers in coordination with extension officers, existing councils, absolutely. Matthias, perhaps also the same perspective. We know we have to act today. We know situation will worsen. How you position also as a companies with partners to address this 10 years perspective?
Yeah, also to the first question, the net zero question, and what investors are doing. We have investors from around the world, and some of our largest, actually all of our largest investors, be it the sovereign fund Temasek of Singapore, be it the sovereign fund in Norway, be it BlackRock in the United States, they all require from their shareholdings to be net zero by 2050. So we see the invisible hand of the market turning green. What we have to avoid is that it turns in a fist. Because once we start to get on that journey, when we then get punched in the gut, then it doesn't help. So that's the conversation we have with our investors, but a lot has happened also thanks to UNFCCC, who kind of sometimes don't see the success. So that's a huge success, the shift of global finance in that direction. We spoke a lot about money, and I was saying there's like the most money in business. Of course, that's not really true, but it is true for our R&D budget. We spend in agriculture alone $2.5 billion a year. And to put that into perspective, it's more than double than our next competitor. But more importantly, it's 3 times the budget of the global CGIAR. So it's a lot of money. And the strategic question is, can we align those $2.5 billion behind 3 simple goals? Goal number 1, reduce carbon emissions in agriculture. The emissions gap is 11 billion tons. We are 11 billion tons away from net zero in agriculture. So how do we innovate to change something there? Goal number 2, enable farmers around the world, larger farmers, smaller family farms, to get paid for removing carbon out of the atmosphere. And goal number 3 is resilience. How can we adjust farming systems in ways that make them more drought resilient, that allow them to resist against storms, to deal better with insect or fungi pressures, and all the other maladies that farmers have to deal with every day. That is kind of what we do, So for us, a decision to invest money in R&D to invent the future of in 10 years needs to hit 1, 2, and sometimes even 3 R's in order to get approved.
I think it's a very clear message, and perhaps one point I would like to come back very quickly to both of you, because that's an essential one where I see also sometimes, and you mentioned CGIAR. CGIAR is an absolutely essential driver in terms of breeding, but CGIAR sometimes perhaps is missing the bit to go also to farmers. There can be question mark. Do you have relationships specifically on programs with CGIAR?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's huge partnership. For example, we work on more drought-resistant rice varieties. Think about that. Half of all fresh water in Asia, goes into rice production. 50%. 70% of all fresh water globally is somehow used in agriculture. And we, with the International Rice Research Institute, as one example, we work very closely together. And the way this works is the CGIAR are very, very strong at R, but when it comes to development, they get weaker. We, of course, are also strong in R, but given that we have to put products in the market, we are strong on development. So we can put innovation or bring innovation faster to the farmers, hopefully to the 1 or 2 that then are successful, and there is a replication. I give an example of that. We have developed short corn in the United States in order to increase the ability of corn to resist extreme wind, to avoid that it knocks over and basically the harvest is destroyed. Now, of course, farmers are skeptical. Why do you buy a short corn when you can grow your traditional ones? There's even pride about the height of the corn. But then you have in Iowa or elsewhere one extreme storm, and everybody's fields are kind of devastated, but the one with short corn is untouched. That's an experience that trumps an argument.
Thank you so much. Let's go very quickly.
Yes, so we work with global and local research organizations. We also have our own R&D team that looks after barley research because, again, we really see that as our role to really steward the future of barley and think through it as a crop grown in rotation and what that looks like and how it contributes to broader food systems. I would like to highlight, though, that you can't have just research try and drive change, right? Because that research, the output, needs to be cascaded. You need to be thinking of the local policies, the local off-takers, and how the extension teams that's going to get it out onto the ground as well. So again, it takes all of us to be able to cascade that research. It's not enough just to have investments into research, but to really build the operating systems and the operating models that are going to cascade it down.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very clear message. Yousef, you're here. You have a lot of impact finally. Perhaps sometimes you don't feel it, but things are moving. And things are moving, I think, also in the terms of partnerships. How you feel, what also perhaps you're perceiving more of what should private sector do more, with whom we should more collaborate, and also perhaps bridge this more what the public sector is doing, public research is doing, and also civil society, I think we didn't mention today, because I think it's also an absolute essential player. Yousef, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy to look around you and see how big a convener this process is, and we only have around here a fraction of those who want to be here. And so the evolution of this process has shown us three types of catalytic power that international law has in promoting partnerships, including by way of the private sector. So Article 12 of the Kyoto Protocol had one sentence: a clean development mechanism is hereby established. That produced a multi-billion-dollar industry, with governments partnering with the private sector, with whatever. Another type is when we are mandated to align with individual types of stakeholders. So we have work streams in the climate change process that get us to have initiatives on knowledge production or on methodology production, etc., or catalyzing finance towards a certain area. So that's another one. But now we're moving into this space where the input is coming out from the stakeholders, from the private sector and other what we call non-party stakeholders into the process. So if you stay long enough here to see what will come in what we call the cover decision, decision 1CB27, you will find that some of the things happening here are making their way into the political process and becoming part of international law. And so in the end, people say we need 100 billion per year for climate change. Now, only 2.5 billion of the 100 billion pass through the financial mechanism of the convention. So what's the other 97.5? This all comes from the stakeholders that we need to partner with. Like I said before, the idea is one of alignment, and you said that as well. Alignment of everyone who's involved in the food system, from the whole supply chain and value chain. And I think the system is being tweaked to be able to respond to the need for partnerships and realize that it's not just international law creating provisions and expecting the whole world to immediately comply, but the whole thing is a huge partnership, and within it there's a lot of individual partnership that have to be nurtured, and we know that the solutions are predominantly coming from the private sector anyway, and so that's the biggest partner there.
Thanks so much. Transforming the agricultural system will take some time. I think we all agree. Now, we don't have time because we have to quickly finish. I would like to ask each of you, 20 seconds, what is your dream for COP28? What will you dream? What should be happening until COP28? Very quickly. Martin, please.
Let me go first, because I have to leave also. I think, first of all, food is a human right, but we also have to get to zero emissions. So what do we need to do at COP28? Build partnerships that can achieve both, not give up one for the other.
Thank you so much. Ezgi.
The future is local, so more focus on local solutions and resilience.
That's a nice one. Matthias?
Almost to a year ago, in the final declaration in Glasgow, 3 words were missing: food, agriculture, and water. So my hope for COP27 is that we find those words in the declaration and then we do something magical with it for COP28.
Clear message. Yousef.
A market signal towards incentivizing and accelerating the move towards regenerative practices.
Thank you so much. Apologize, we have to finish. And we have Jay, who is making the closing remarks. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure if these work. So my name is Jay Collins. I'm a vice chairman of Citi, and here, pleasure to be with BCIU. You know, 2 seconds to thank BCIU. I'm sorry. So, Jay Collins from Citi. I am honored to be here today. I'm just going to say a couple closing words, 4 points. But before I do, I want to thank BCIU. You know, Citi has been a member of BCIU for a long time. They are a convener of choice for us. They pull business leaders, governments together, and they get us thinking about the issues that matter, and that's why we're a part of it. That's why I'm here today. Second, on adaptation, absolutely critical issue that has been a priority for this COP. Last year, we were focused on mitigation. This year is a COP about adaptation, and that's why this is so important. So, first of all, must do. Right now, we have 800 million people that are undernourished and 323 million people in the world that are facing acute hunger crisis. And so this isn't a nice to have. This has to be pari passu in there with and aligned with the climate crisis. It is interrelated. A third of emissions come from the food system. Second point that is critical is this is an ecosystem problem. You heard about this today. What do I mean by that? It means imagine, I hope many of you play some instrument, but imagine that you're the best musician in the world. You are a first chair musician, and I tell you all to play now. Don't give you music, don't give you tempo, don't tell you when to start, and most importantly, no conductor. Well, you get a cacophony, we get complete failure. So much of what is here in and around this COP27 process is the conductor, the leadership, the ability to pull complex ecosystems, and by the way, food is just about as complex as it gets, to pull them together, to get them to play. So I'll give you one example, Nwefi. Many of you have heard that in Egypt, and what's happening here, it is the pillar of the nexus of food, of water, food, and energy around which Egypt has aligned. And the fantastic thing about what they're doing is they've assigned the development bank community to those pillars. And IFAD is at the core of agriculture. So what's happening? Real cases. Right now, the Egyptians have agricultural projects. IFAD is in the room, sitting with us, each of us, private sector, public sector, and saying, okay, you do this, we will enable here, we'll get the co-ops and the food, the farmers together, and we will make this work. What could we do to fund this at scale? How would that work? So you've got that conductor, and in every one of this situation, you need a convener of choice. Third, we need to fund at scale, and we need to fund more efficiently. So there's $600 billion spent a year by governments in food around the world. That is not spent efficiently. And I can promise you that we're not using the MDBs, the multilateral development banks, capital efficiently and effectively to crowd in the private sector in food and ag. I heard ministers the other day on one of the panels, before I spoke about how to crowd in the private sector, say, adaptation is a public sector thing, we're crowding in private sector into mitigation. Wrong. I want to tell the private sector on the panel today, I want to tell Bayer and Anheuser-Busch that they don't do large scale. All of the fast-moving consumer goods companies are off-takers. They can help us scale. If you have Rivolus in the room and you give Rivolus for drip irrigation, if you give them payment comfort, if you give them an enabled agricultural system and a local bank that banks the farmers and some payment security, you will get drip irrigation in the community. So message number 3 was private sector should be in the room. We can help do this. And then the final comment, which again, I'm just reiterating what you hear today, is tech matters. I teach sustainable innovation and technology at Georgetown, and precision ag is portable. It's not perfectly portable. You have to adjust to the local communities and the farmers, but it's portable. These technologies are scalable, they can move, and we're talking to some of the largest private equity, large ag players in the world about how to take technology companies that are effective with small farmers in the room, in the lettuce belt of America, and get them on the road and bring them to communities with support mechanisms of the local communities, the local banks, the UN agencies, the World Food Programs of the world, the FAOs, the UNDPs, and the IFADs, to see if we can make that work. But tech is transformational. It is, if done appropriately, a strong hope for the food and ag system. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here.